an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Elder Empire C Book 1 of Sea and Shadow 26, 27, and 28. In these chapters, well, I can understand why Calder hates the Emperor so much. Wow, can I ever? And also, Bliss is fun AF. I really like being in her head a lot, and I hope we get some of that again. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to George for commissioning this episode. George is here in the chat. Hello. I really loved this. This felt like so many more chapters than it actually was, so many more pages, because so much is crammed in. I can't believe how much happens right at the tail end of this, you know? And because we have seen Shara's side of things before, part of me thought, well, how much new stuff can there really even be? And I keep forgetting about the flashbacks. And while I may know where Calder is today, for some reason that gives me this idea that the flashbacks are either going to be boring or they won't be very informative. I don't know why I think that, because there's a ton of information in the flashbacks. And they're also really entertaining. I mean, we had a literal heist. So I don't know what my problem has been, but it was really gripping from beginning to end. And I am dying to know, like, not only what happens next, but I really want to know Will White's thought process on deciding to write this as a pair of, like, simultaneous books. Because is it just, did he like come up with this because he kept trying to decide which character's perspective he wanted to write on, and he couldn't decide, and he was just like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to do both of them? Was he initially writing it as one book and we were jumping between characters and he was like, this is messy, I don't like how this is? Or I mean, it could be both as well. But I just keep thinking about how weird it is to jump, like, if I were to move on to the next two books, I would go from here back to Shara's perspective for the second book and then call, you know, and it's a similar thing as with the flashbacks, where you're so engrossed in the storyline of the present that you think any deviation is going to be frustrating and boring. But of course it's not, because there's a ton going on with the other character. So my impulse on, like, thinking about going back to Shara's perspective is like, I don't want to do that. I want to know what's going on with Calder. And then I think about Shara's POV and I'm like, well, but there's some wild shit going on there, and I do want to know more about that. And I wind up kind of arguing with myself. This is how it is in, like, Song of Ice and Fire, where there are several different, like, character perspectives, and you'll jump from, like, Tyrion to Theon, and you'll be like, fuck, I want to read more about Tyrion. And then you start getting into Theon and you're like, oh, never mind, this is really good. The only character that you have every right to be annoyed that you're in his POV is Bran. And even he's not as bad as people say. Anyway, so chapter 26. We start off with, like, some talk about Chimera and what they are. It turns out, low-key, we don't know. They're magical. That's, like, all they know, and they don't really understand how they do anything that they do. They don't think they're related to elders, but they don't know for sure. So this chapter starts off with the 11 years ago. And it turns out that the woman that comes and collects Calder is Geraldus Teach. And honestly, it makes a lot more sense now why she views Calder the way she does. It makes a lot more sense why he obviously has so much antipathy towards her. There's just a history there that honestly I would have been fine with them disliking each other anyway because their personalities are so very clearly at odds with each other. But when you know what position they each held in each other's past, it becomes very, very understandable, the attitude that they each have toward one another. So, yeah, she comes to get him. I have come to retrieve the criminal Calder Martin, who stands accused of destroying an imperial prison, conspiring to set free a prisoner, and stealing a ship that is the rightful property of the Black Watch Guild. Come with me. And she has a blade on her that he inadvertently reads. And reminder, he's got reader burn right now, so it's not great for him. And it says that weapon was older than the Empire, older than the Emperor, perhaps as old as the monster pulling this ship. And we had heard him talking earlier about how dangerous she was and how easy it would be for her to completely fuck him up. And later on, she gets so angry because, surprise, does turn out that Calder wants to be emperor himself. You could have knocked me over. I should have seen it, but also it just doesn't feel like something he would want. You know? He doesn't seem like somebody who wants to be part of an institution. He is, because he's been put in a position where he doesn't have many options here. But if he were given options, I would assume that he would just be willing to live for himself, have some fun, make some money. And considering what he's been through and what he goes through here, it makes more sense now that he has been the victim and his father was the victim of a corrupted emperor and a really fucked up system. And he would want to do something about that. That really does ring true for me. But because I didn't have a lot of this information before, I was just but he's just sort of like what's the word I want? He's like a mad cat trickster, He's just somebody who's out here just doing what he feels like doing, taking jobs. He practically gave me the vibes of a bounty hunter, And, it just doesn't seem like that would be compatible with his personality. But evidently it was all working toward this cause in a lot of ways. And what I find really interesting is that they are down with it. I genuinely didn't expect that either. That if he proposed this, they would go for it. And not everybody does. Teach is not happy about it. But they don't have any other options. That's really what it comes down to. Nibirius was the best option they had. And he's dead. But even if he weren't, if they brought him in and tried to talk to him about it at this point, they would realize that's definitely not happening. But we'll get there. So he gets taken away and his father tries to say, take me instead. I'm the one you're after. And she is yeah, no, you're not the one we're after. And it says Calder felt a force pass by him, the shadow of something huge and unseen, and his father collapsed. Okay. What's that? Is that her weapon lashing out? Because later on he says something about how she could probably kill him from across the room with that weapon if she wanted to. And I have to assume this is her somehow bashing his dad over the head. This is just OP. Yikes. That's really scary. I don't love this at all. So. Oh, right. I forgot about this. She bundled Calder under one arm, tossing him on the bird's back. I forgot that he gets brought in on a bird, which is kind of rad. And he's arguing with her about you can't leave them there because they don't know how to steer. And she's oh, we're sending people out for them. And he asks, who are you? I'm Geraldus Teach, General of the Empire and head of the Imperial Guard. I'm taking you to trial. And it turns out his trial is with the Emperor, which he is really not expecting at all. And this whole interview, it doesn't go how I thought. I'll be honest, I don't really know what I expected exactly, but because Shara's POV was the first one I read, and she seemed to have a generally favorable view of the Emperor, I kind of thought, I was first of all giving the Emperor the benefit of the doubt that he didn't know what was going on in Candle Bay prison, which it turns out, it seems like he definitely did. And secondly, I kind of thought that like maybe Calder's outburst that he has a little bit later, that this would somehow speak to something in the Emperor. You know, this is the kind of thing that a lot of bad movies and writing has sort of like ingrained in me, is that if the hero has the right amount of moral outrage and sincerity, and he really speaks truth to power, and that power isn't absolutely corrupted, it will have no choice but to bend to the will of whomever is speaking, you know? That's not it. And Will White is so good at undermining those kinds of tropes. And yet I still keep falling into the trap of expecting that sort of thing, this predictable thing. And I don't know when I'm going to learn that he just doesn't do that, you know? And I'm also like, I know how good Calder Martin's judgment is. Like, I have seen the people he's interacted with so far and the judgment calls he has made and how much I agree with what he says. So I also should have known that if he despises the Emperor as much as he does, he really must have some good info on that. And I was attributing that mostly to him reading the objects that had belonged to the Emperor and seeing what he was doing and the way he operated. It didn't occur to me that his despising the Emperor was also based on something personal that happened to him. I thought it was pure, like, reading, you know? So I never thought about this happening the way that it does. So he goes into the room, and the first thing that, like, we have been told from Shara's perspective is just how unbelievably powerful this guy is. Like, it's ridiculous. He can practically read your mind, you know? And I don't know how absolutely true that is, but it's very clear that he can tell whether Calder's lying or not. And when Calder says something about, like, well, why does it matter if I lie if you can just tell what the truth is anyway? And he says, well, it tells me what kind of man you are if you decide to lie, which, yeah. So he comes in and he says, you tracked down at least one artifact of mine, a pen. You must have found another. And Calder tries to act like, I don't know. No, I never found anything else. And we wanted to find something else, but as much as we tried, we couldn't. And the Emperor is like, oh, it was a key. Oh, I haven't carried that many keys. I wonder what it is. And Calder is just like, what? A key? No, I don't have a key. And the Emperor is like looking at him. It's like he's riffling through Calder's memories from afar. Like he's reading the guy's memories from across the room the way that you would if you touched somebody, which I think might be exactly what's happening. You weren't surprised by it, nor did you sell it. It must have been the copper key to my dungeon. I can see how you may have used it to open the cells in Candle Bay. I sense Kellerak upon you. Why did you trade him the key? And Calder is like, oh my God. Like, you can sense that there's almost a nausea where this guy knows so everything and exactly how it went down in so many ways that there is just no point in pleading ignorance, in lying. There's just, you know, and of course he doesn't even have to answer that. The Emperor's like, oh, you traded for a Laetheton to pull your ship. I got it. They hadn't bothered to bind Calder's hands. He couldn't pose a danger to the emperor, even if he carried a gun in each hand and the man was completely unguarded. What he didn't understand was why they needed to try him at all. The emperor could read everything he wanted to know. Calder didn't need to be conscious. They could have drugged him, read his guilt, and executed him before he woke up. And this is when the emperor is like, because Calder's like, ooh, God, okay, so why should I even bother telling the truth if you already know the truth? And the emperor is like smiling a little bit, like in amusement, and there's a friendliness in a vague way that lulls me into thinking he is going to be lenient here. Even though he's just said, like, beware of deals that seem too favorable. Honestly, you know what I'm realizing a lot of this is? First of all, the trope that I already mentioned, where if the protagonist is, like, righteous enough, then the authority figure will be impressed. Not even, like, have to capitulate, but genuinely be like, oh, wow, you're made of different stuff than nobody talks back to me except for, and you had the guts to do it, and you were right, and yada yada. I'm so used to that. And I'm realizing that a lot of that also comes from, like, dealing with adults in life, like authority figures in life, especially at school. If you manage to make them, like, kind of crack a smile and be amused at your antics, it was like you had just gotten your foot wedged in the door a little bit and you could really move around from there. And I was really good at getting adults to like me when I was, like, a middle schooler and teenager. So the fact that the emperor is sort of reacting positively here, I sort of, like, fell into this false sense of security where I was like, okay, he's in. He's got him a little bit, you know? I don't, like, what an idiot. What a sweet summer child I was. 5 prison guards were killed by your chained elder. 10 more were injured. From the wreckage of the Candle Bay facility, we pulled a further 15 corpses. Guards, alchemists, prisoners, clerical staff. Prisoners escaped by the score, and many of them had been imprisoned for crimes greater than your father's. Now we have murderers, rapists, dangerous soul-bound, and black alchemists walking the streets of the capital thanks to your actions. And rather than, like, be cowed by this, it just makes Calder more angry. And this, you know, like I had said during the last episode that I was really glad that he tore Candle Bay apart, but that there might be some people who really needed to be in jail. And I don't think anybody, like, needs to be experimented on to the point where they desire death. But, you know, like, this could also kind of backfire. And it turns out, yeah, but also I was hoping that the emperor would have not known what was going on there. And thus there would be a part of him that saw the, like, overall benefit, I guess, really, to Calder having done this. Needless to say, that's not how it goes. Calder, I witnessed 5 men and women gladly fall to their deaths on the rocks of Candle Bay. I don't know what experiments your alchemists ran on my father, but he begged me to push him out of a window. He carried such pain with him that I could feel it pouring from him like heat from a bonfire. He tried to strangle himself with his bedsheets, to shatter the window with his chair so that he could leap from his cell, and he was imprisoned for stealing a pen. If the emperor was moved, offended, or provoked, he showed nothing. He did not just steal a pen, Calder, as you know better than most. He stole my pen. I knew a man who killed 32 innocent people with a knife that I had once used to spread butter. When I use an object, even for the briefest period, it is cleansed by the Luminians and then incinerated. But over time, inevitably, some fragment of refuse evades even our notice and escapes. And Calder can't let go. He says, Candle Bay was a house of torture. It was better off destroyed. Despite what you may believe, my guild of alchemists is not on trial today either. No reaction. Nothing. Was just, I'm saying he knew. I don't actually have evidence that he knew, but he does not seem at all surprised. I can't tell if that's just because he's very good at masking his emotions and reactions, or if it's because he didn't know. Like, I am assuming, though, I really think he must, because he's too powerful for something like that to remain hidden from him. I just don't see how they could manage to do that. So then he asks, what do you know about the navigators? And it's just like a complete shift in topic. And Calder for a second is like really wrong-footed. And he asks, what do you think makes their ships able to navigate the waters of the Aeon? And eventually he just tells Calder they have guides. The puzzle came apart in Calder's mind. Of course, the navigators had to be guided through the threats of the Aeon, which were often caused by elders. That was what the Black Watch had been trying to do with the Testament, summon a bigger, stronger guide. Elders. They have elders bound to their ships. Only one ship has that distinction. The others simply have the power of an elder bound into their ship, through bone or blood or a particular artifact. Then the ships themselves are awakened, bound to their captains, soul-bound. And Calder says, is that what I did? And I was genuinely surprised that he didn't realize that was what happened. And I guess it makes sense that he wouldn't, like that. I just really thought he would have put the pieces together. Like the whole look of the ship changed and you had this sudden connection to it that was so innate. How did you not realize that was what was going on? And the Emperor says, yeah, it's soulbound to you. We didn't need to tow it back. The Liatheton dragged it into the nearby harbor on its own. That's why you have not been executed already. How else do you think I would deal with someone who committed thousands of gold marks of property damage, murdered 20 citizens, and stole a priceless ship? You deserve execution if anyone in my empire does. But I will turn you over to the custody of the Navigators Guild, who will put you to work in my service until your debt to me is cleared. Your bonds and responsibilities to the Black Watch are hereby abolished. Calder couldn't help the smile that started to spread across his face. Your mercy is as limitless as the breadth of your rule, my emperor. The emperor did not smile. Bring in the prisoner. And I was like, oh, fuck. Because again, I thought this was going to be a McGonagall moment, and Harry, like, he rides on his broom and chases down the Remembrall, and McGonagall looks like she's really mad at him, but then it turns out that she's actually getting the rules bent so that he can play Quidditch, even though first years aren't supposed to have brooms. I thought this was going to be oh, you're in so much trouble, except you saved a bunch of prisoners and I didn't know what was going on, and you awakened a ship in a really distinctive way, which shows that you're a prodigy, which means that you're off the hook. I really did. I really genuinely thought this guy is I'm just, I don't know. There's no excuse. So here comes Roderick, and this shit is so quick. That's the thing that I wasn't ready for. I thought there would be more of not more ceremony, because there is some. It's more that it's so abrupt and there is very little shock to the moment itself. And there's no pause between Roderick Martin, citizen of my empire, I sentence you to die. Geraldus Teach brushed Roderick's shoulder with the flat of her blade. That's literally it. She doesn't stab him. She doesn't behead him. She doesn't do anything. Just brushes him with the flat of her blade. Holy fucking shit. That is terrifying. Oh my God. Can you imagine, having to serve under her and knowing that you just touched that shit the wrong way and like that could be it for you. No, thank you. Oh my God. With an audible shriek that emanated from nowhere and seemed to tear the world in half, the life left Roderick Martin's body. Yikes. And there's this moment here too. The Emperor tossed something at Calder's feet, something that clinked and rang like a tiny bell. The silver coin. But now it was warped and deformed as if under great pressure. I don't really know what this is supposed to mean other than to be like, hey, I just fucked this entire coin up while we were casually talking because I'm that powerful. Is that all that was meant to be? Calder, as his father dies, lunges toward the Emperor, like ready to try and actually kill this guy with his hands. Like, he just completely loses his head. And a blonde girl held a bronze knife to Calder's throat, while a Heartlander boy about his age held his arms locked behind his back. A pale, black-haired girl, perhaps a year or two younger than he, stood in front of him, hands empty and spread in front of her. These are our friends, right? Maya, Lucan, and Shara. Calder could feel the other boy's intent smothering his own, countering the rage and lethal intent that Calder was pouring into everything. But the other boy was canceling it all out. And this was interesting to me because there was like, I was sort of thinking that Lucan was going to wind up being slightly less powerful a reader than Calder, but it sounds like he's a more powerful reader, actually. And that, again, I've mentioned that perhaps readers have different specialties. Perhaps there are some readers that are more powerful in a certain aspect of it than others, but I don't really know enough about it to think that. So I'm just going off of basic, hierarchy. And when Shara asks who he was, Calder says he was my father, and she just goes, well, then he'd want you to be quiet so we don't kill you. Calder glared at the Emperor. You keep children around to protect you? And the Emperor had already been like, bitch, everybody's a child to me. Like, I'm thousands of years old. Who cares? Doesn't matter. So he gets dragged out. Another set of prisoners was being dragged inside. It's just so... I really, again, the tropes are that the protagonist is the only person who exists in the world. And everything that happens to him is a massive production and hugely significant. And I love here that his father is executed so quickly after the Emperor makes his declaration. And then they're both just dragged out. And it's clear he's one in a line of many waiting in the fucking lobby to be seen. Like, it's just, he isn't important. He's just like another person who did a fucking thing that he has to deal with today. Yikes. So, we go back to chapter 27. And Urziah hasn't actually died. I thought that he would have died already, that the power being pulled from him by Shara's blade was like him being killed. And it turns out, no, that's just like the power being pulled from his vessel. He is still alive, and he thinks that he killed her, Maya. And Calder can't bear to tell him that she's still alive. Like, it's awful. So eventually he does die. Calder takes his hatchets, and when he touches them, he gets like all of these memories of Urziah and has to like back away from them and cut them off. And he is ready to fucking like face off with all of Nakothi's children, because he's just like, good. I have so much rage right now. Let's fucking do this. And this is the moment in the other book when Shara is looking at him. Lucan and her and Maya are joking around, and there's an odd look that comes over Calder's face. And at the time, I said, I wonder if it's like the fact that they're actual people is bothering him. Seeing them joke around and like be normal might be, they've been the boogeyman. And now all of a sudden they're acting like just random people. And that turns out to be exactly what it is. They were the ruthless assassins who had pursued him since he'd left the capital. They acted like his crew. For some reason, the thought seethed with anger. What right did they have to joke around with each other? They could kill his friend and still play around? And I was just like pretty surprised that I got that so correct, because that's exactly what's going on with him. And yeah, especially after Uzziah just died, to have a moment where the people who did this to your friend, like, not only are they just seeming like people, but maybe almost caused you to crack a smile at a joke, like that. You feel like you're betraying the friend who just died. So this is when Shuffles comes to him and he sends a message out by using Shuffles to boom the words out over the water to the Testament. All the children of Nicothi on the island swarmed down into the shattered arena, hungering for his blood. They sought Shera's blade more than anything else, but now they would dismantle him on the way. He turned back to Shuffles, and he couldn't help a smile. Jerry would love this. So, he starts going nuts fighting, and then we go to Jerry's perspective. And it turns out that there is another prisoner who tried to escape, and the children got them. So later on, when Calder comes down to try and see if she's like still alive, there's just basically a pile of marinara sauce, and he's kind of not sure if that's Jerry or not. He tries to read like the bars and the floor to sense what's going on. It seems like he gets that she is still alive somewhere, but it almost feels like he doesn't want to let himself have hope over that. And even if she is still alive, even if she had managed to escape, he's still blaming himself for the situation in the first place. The fact that there is a possibility that she's dead. And if she is, that's on him. And if she isn't, that's no thanks to him. He could have helped, and he didn't, and left her in a spot where she had to desperately claw for her life, and she wouldn't have been there if he had just helped her. So, understandably, there's a lot of guilt rattling around in him, and I don't know what he's going to do with that. But in this moment, Jerry is being attacked by this kind of crab-like thing, and it's shearing through the bars, and there's all of this, like, there's this chaos, and she's pretty certain she's going to die. And Jerry is just like, all right, well, maybe I'm going to die, but I always said I would die fighting, so let's fucking do this. And she starts to, like, get ready. And then all of a sudden, this transmission comes in. A single piece of jewelry tumbled through the air, gleaming green and gold. She recognized it instantly, just as she felt her own limbs. The fury of her vessel filled her, and she lashed out with a blade of emerald fire. So, this is her earring, but I don't know how they got, because, like, she was wearing it when she was captured, right? So how did they get it back and then send it to her? That's the thing that kind of confused me here. I was just wanting to know exactly the logistics behind this. But anyway, they tell her, we must make new plans. And they sort of like apologize for the way shit didn't go as they had told her it would go. And in the swimming lights and endless black of the void, an elder spawn floated. It looked like an octopus, tendrils swimming in unseen water, but its head was smooth and flat. Was she supposed to ride on that? And Jerry is like, I think I'll just walk out the front door. Guys, thanks though. And they tell her it's unstable. Like, this is really unsafe. You need to go out this way. If you leave any other way, you're going to die. And she demands that they give their word and does it. And like, just as she does it, the whole place collapses and they basically do an I told you so. I love this so much. This moment of them being like, what did we say? I'm like, you don't get to be smug, guys. You just fucked up so completely that there's a fucking handmaiden here now. Like, that's on you. And you're acting like, well, we really know what we're doing. Shut the fuck up. No, you do not. You don't know anything. You've got a couple little bits of like trickery that you can manage that other people don't know about. But like, you just don't have the right to act superior about anything. Just stop it. So then we go to Calder's POV where he comes down hoping she's still alive and the whole place has been caved in. Let's see. Oh, right. And he gets interrupted by Maya, who is saying, you will not escape. And he says, you should have checked behind you. And she does looks at him like, you think I'm going to fall for that? And then Shuffle screams behind you and she spins around. Calder clubbed her on the back of the head with the hilt of his sword. She didn't lose consciousness, not entirely, but she did collapse. That was good enough for him. So he takes her knives, and she is struggling a little bit, but he just like tosses her over his shoulder, and kind of like, as he's doing this, he's like, oh, I don't know that this is a good idea. This might be really like a bad plan. But he also is so angry, you know, and he's so resentful and he just kind of wants to get some of his own back. And I kind of get that. It's just really funny to me to know in all of this that he's second guessing himself even as he does it. It's not that he's looking back later going, maybe that wasn't a great plan. It's while he's doing it that he's going, oh man, this is stupid. What am I doing? So then we start chapter 28 and we get, all of the great elders listed here. Nooooooo, first it's mentioned that like the elders aren't probably actually malicious. They each have just a belief that is so alien to us that it feels malicious, but in their minds, it makes total sense and is reasonable. Nooooooo seems to believe in her way that she is improving humans by warping their bodies. Kafanakar cares not for humanity, but he is interested in preserving this planet as a habitat for his worms. Urgnot works for peace as he sees it, the true peace of non-existence. Tharlos prefers a world of constant, endless change. Othagor wants, above all, to preserve life. Akhmagut seeks knowledge at all costs. Kellerak could say that he grants wishes. And, you know, the Tharlos prefers a world of constant, endless change. This is what we wind up seeing because we go to Bliss's perspective. I am just going to say this right now. She is my favorite perspective. What a fucking weirdo. I love her. Oh my God. What is she even? She has like, there's something very interesting about the way that she interacts with other people because she seems to not really understand. That's not right. She does understand emotions, but it's more like she doesn't really experience emotions the same way as other people do. So she has to actively engage in observing and does so with this sort of detachment that isn't really empathy. It's more like she's studying a subject. You know what I mean? It's like she's looking through the bars of the cage going, oh, I think you're angry. Look at like based on the expression on your face. Okay, well, if you're angry, let me think about how to deal with that. It's all extremely remote. And it sort of makes me think of like maybe somebody who isn't neurotypical trying to understand how to like interact with people and like they've figured out a coping mechanism, but there's a weird sort of delay with the way that they speak and then stop and interpret what was just said to them. And they have to also stop and like really read the body language and make some assessments based on that. And I really enjoy the fact that despite the fact that she has this distance, and that it's not really an empathy, because an empathy implies that you're able to sort of feel from that person's perspective. She isn't feeling like that, but she still cares, like she does. It's not like when you say, oh, they have no empathy, that usually means that they just don't give a shit what happens to anybody else. But that doesn't really seem to be what's going on here. She does care. It's just that there is a part of her that has been cut off from being able to connect with people in a certain way. And so she's trying her best to manage to do it anyway. And considering the way that we get a little, it's sort of an offhand remark that she was raised somewhere like Candle Bay, I have to imagine that's part of why she's like this. That they just did shit to her, and it caused her to have to dissociate to survive to a point. Or maybe they did experiments that made her feel distant from people, like that was the point of them. I don't know. But it seems really clear that whatever they did, it just had this profound effect on her personality and her ability to process things. And yeah, it feels very non-typical, but really compelling. And like I said, there's just this sense from her that she genuinely cares and is just doing her best with what she's got. And what she's got is fucking weird. So what can she do, So the spear of Tharlos squirmed within her coat, knocking against the fabric like a fist against an oak door. So this is something that we had seen before, something writhing around under her coat and her just sort of smacking it to make it stop. And it turns out it's this weapon that's sort of alive. And she pulls it out later, and that shit is way too big to have fit in that pocket. So it's a very unnerving moment for a lot of people. Tharlos was far too predictable. He always wanted everything to change. So boring. So what if he turned all shoes into ducks? If shoes were constantly turning into other things, then it wouldn't be anything special when they eventually started quacking. No one would notice. Change was only interesting when it was unexpected, and Tharlos could never understand that. That's why he would never beat her. What? That's why he would never beat her. So it's like Maya kind of struggling with this thing, this connection that she has. But Tharlos is a great elder. This isn't some chimera. This is fucking serious. And what the fuck? This is a whole other level of shit. This is like somebody walking around with the heart of Nkothi, basically, but much stranger. And then this moment, the image struck her again of people walking around with ducks strapped to their feet, and she almost giggled. She thought about giggling. She imagined herself letting loose a nice girlish giggle, and that was just as good as the real thing. This is what I mean. She doesn't laugh because she feels a thing. She starts to feel a thing and then analyzes it and is like, well, I thought about feeling it. And I guess that's close enough to actually feeling it, which is just wild. So she hops down and somebody ushers in Alsa Greyweather. They didn't look happy about it, but neither of them appeared quite so miserable as Alsa. Her face was gray, her hands tied in front of her, her eyes red and puffy. That meant she'd been crying, or that she hadn't gotten much sleep, or that someone had sprayed an irritant in her eyes, or she had imbibed any number of alchemical substances which could be either harmful or recreational. After a moment's consideration, Bliss decided that weeping or exhaustion were the two most likely possibilities. She has to go through a catalog in her mind of the physical symptoms against what it could potentially be and what's most likely. And probably us, if we were face to face with her, we would see her and immediately be like, that bitch was crying. Like, we would know. There would just be a vibe. But she can't do that. You know, it's systematic in a way that feels almost mechanical. Are you under arrest, Elsa? My son had his trial this morning. As a result, my former husband was executed. Calder was exiled to the Aeon under the supervision of the navigators, and I was remanded to your custody. And Bliss is like, a trial for what? Elsa's eyes widened, an expression of surprise, or shock, or fear, or anger. Probably surprise. This is just great. I love it. So Elsa has to tell her what he did, and I love this. Which prison? Bliss asked. From what Bliss had observed of typical conversation, her question must have seemed out of context, but Elsa answered immediately. Candle Bay Imperial Prison. That was why Bliss liked Elsa. No matter what else changed, Elsa Greyweather still did what she was supposed to. She was a constant. This is something that I really feel like I have seen before. And this can be something that people with autism face, or somebody with like ADD, where their attention during a conversation gets grabbed by something that isn't actually the point of what you're saying, but that's what they zero in on. And you have to sort of like adjust what you think they're going to be reacting to, because that isn't what actually got their attention. And I really like that also like just doesn't question it and just answers the question. Like, that's how I operate, where somebody asks me something and I don't go, that's weird, why would you ask that right now? Almost ever. I usually am just like, well, I'll just answer it. It's faster. Like, maybe you know something. Maybe I'm giving you helpful information. Maybe you'll give me helpful information. And I really like that there's a sort of practicality about Elsa with that. So, yeah, it turns out that she knows what the fuck they do there. Which, this is why I'm assuming that the fucking Emperor has to know. If Bliss knew, the Emperor knows. They would attempt to increase docility, prevent a return to prior behavior, and generally improve the prisoners by means of altering their bodies and minds. By means of poking and prodding, by means of needles and potions that burn, and tools that cut memories like paper. They'll take their subjects apart, stick them back together, and then cut them apart again, over and over. Bliss had been born in just such a facility. Yikes. I'm sorry. Sorry, Bliss, that fucking blows. So she unlocks Elsa. And the guards are like, we're not supposed to do this. We're supposed to send her to a secure facility and just get your signature. Bliss rarely felt anything like anger, but something inside her had been scraped raw, thinking of Kenatalia and their experiments. And I really enjoy this. She is firmly on Calder's side here. Like, clearly, she's just like, good. I wish that he'd torn it down twice. So she pulls the spear out, and it's 6 feet tall. It took all of Bliss's willpower to keep the weapon from driving everyone else insane. Even with her restraint, the plants in the greenhouse twisted and danced as though driven by 1,000 shifting winds. Her coat flapped in a wind that didn't exist, her hair blowing in the opposite direction. One of the watchmen shielded his eyes, shouting as though the sight of the bone burned him, and the other covered his ears. Elsa shook like a sail in high wind, but she kept her eyes fixed on Bliss. As the head of the Black Watch, I hereby decree that Elsa Greyweather is remanded to my personal custody. If you would like to protest, file a complaint. And they fucking just managed to get out of there. And she looks at Elsa and says, do you think they'll really file a complaint? Elsa struggled to speak. No, she said at last. No, I don't think they will. Good. I don't like paperwork. Oh, never change. You delightful little fucking weirdo. And Bliss says at one point, I have to feed the spear because it's restless. And she just jams it into a tree. And they stand back. When they were far enough away, Bliss turned to watch the show. The bark was already shot through with pale purple flesh, like cracks in a window. Flesh spread through the tree, bringing wood to life. The lowest branch drooped like a melting candle as it changed from a stiff bough to a limb of skin and meat. I hate it. I just really do. Bliss is enjoying it. She's watching it and she's like, oh, this is wild. Check it out. And I'm just disgusted. When she stepped up to the newborn creature's trunk to retrieve her spear, the waving tentacles parted to let her pass. She pulled the sharpened bone out, leaving no wound behind. And I guess this just stays as a tentacle tree? Like, that's just what it is now. This is when Bliss notices that Elsa's not having the kind of reaction she would expect, which would be probably disgust or shock. And then Bliss draws the conclusion, well, if she's not having that reaction, something else is going on. And this is just the whole way that this goes, guys. Again, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm just reading her whole chapter, but it fucking fascinates me. She says, you'll stay with me under my supervision. You will be very secure, and you may be able to help me with some investigations of my own. She had started to hear some disturbing rumors. Navigators and their passengers had spotted children of Nikothi swimming around the Aeon. The island over the dead mother's corpse was shaking, sending unseasonable waves into the shallower islands, and more than a few sailors had reported contact with Kellerak. Even more troubling than the rumors were the silences. Bliss had always found stillness more disturbing than screams. So, in the short term, Bliss knew she would feel better if she could just get Elsa to relax. Exercise was supposed to alleviate stress, but Elsa would probably not enjoy a fencing match in her current state. Alcohol relieved stress in some, but seemed to increase it in others. Bliss couldn't take that risk. That left, to Bliss's knowledge, only companionship and sugary foods. Bliss took Elsa's hand in her own and proposed a solution. Let's go buy a pie from a restaurant. It is my turn to purchase. Listen, if this isn't a bitch after my own fucking heart, I swear to God. I'm super sad because my husband just got executed, or ex-husband, and my son has been exiled, and somebody's like, let's go buy a pie. Fucking correct. Yep. That's it. You know, the only other thing that works is weed. That's it. Doesn't seem like they have weed here. Maybe they do, or some other... They probably alchemists make something like it, but I don't feel like Bliss would fuck with that because she does not like alchemists, clearly. So, then we go back to present day. And this is when Calder has a conversation. First of all, he talks a little bit to Andal about his regret not going back for Jerry sooner. Then we have this fucking moment with Andal where he goes up to Nibarius and questions him about what his thought process and priorities are and what he would do if he were given power. And Andal just fucking shoots him in the head. And Calder, it's like, first of all, seeing this happen in front of him is just, it's its own shock. But Andal doing this, truly, just completely out of left field. He had no inkling this was about to happen. Too many chances we couldn't take, Andal explained, wiping down his gun with a handkerchief. Reload that for me, Foster. This is great. And this is the way I wish so many more fucking characters like this were dealt with. Sometimes people just need to be killed. And I don't I don't propose that I know when that is true, but y'all know what I mean. And there was no help for Nibarius. He had fucking lost it. And he was just going to continue to be a hazard. There was nothing to be done. So, yeah. So at this point, Calder, he's looking at his jacket, and he is just like, you know what? And he takes it off and chucks it in after Nibirius. It was time to stop holding his cards back and put everything on the table. So then we have him basically making his claim to become emperor. And like I said, I thought everybody would balk a lot more than they do, because I wasn't thinking about how few options are actually open to them. I love this. Before Cheska could welcome him or anyone else could say a word, he bowed to Geraldus Teach. General Teach, I apologize once again for the unfortunate circumstances of our last meeting. What about the meeting before that? Teach asked, eyes cold. I apologize for the unfortunate circumstances surrounding each and every one of our meetings, and I hope we can be more friendly in the future. And he turns to Bliss and thanks her for her support. And Teach, it's clearly like she's very irritated by this. So he tells them Nibirius is dead. There's clearly like some suspicion that maybe that wasn't actually necessary, but we fucking know it was. I think anybody who saw Nibirius would be able to like support their claim. I'm not worried about this. And Cheska is like, oh my God, months of planning and so much money. This sucks. And Calder is like, I think I may have a solution. And he opens this case, and I thought this was going to be the crown, but no, it's a bunch of those like candles, the memory candles that are apparently super, super valuable. He claimed that all the riches of the imperial palace and all the details of the accounts were somewhere in here. So these were Nibirius's. If a reader, say me for instance, burns them, we should be able to learn something. At least we can get your investment back. That doesn't address our most important concern, Teach said irritably. We still have no candidate from the throne. And this is when Calder's like, all right, so I want to make sure I get your list of requirements. Powerful reader, well-connected, a man, rich, well-educated, dignified, someone the people can approve of. Bliss finally looked up, adding, I'd like it if he were sane, but I will work with what I can get. With all that in mind, I would like to propose a new candidate. Pinching the burlap sack between two fingers, he picked it up. The Emperor's crown tumbled out, rolling slightly as it landed on the table. I like to think of myself as a powerful reader. I am reasonably well educated. I can be dignified when I put my mind to it. Hopefully, I will be coming into some money soon. I'm reasonably sane. If you three approve, that would qualify me as well-connected. And I assure you that I am indeed a man. Cheska pounded a fist on the table. Prove it! Oh, Cheska is so much fun. What a weirdo. I like her too. So he puts the crown on and it's just like, so what do you think? And Cheska starts cracking up. And I thought that she was going to be like, absolutely fucking not. But she's cracking up because she's like, this is actually a good idea. And like, clearly she didn't see this coming. She never thought this would be the thing. And she's like, fine, you know? Only Geraldus Teach seemed to object, scowling at the sight of him wearing the crown. More than anything, we need a willing person to sit on the throne. As far as that goes, you qualify. But you are quite possibly the worst candidate when it comes to patching relations with the other guilds. The consultants are after you as we speak. How will you handle them? Calder tried to project absolute confidence and an air of mystery. In fact, I've already taken steps. Trust me, I have held one card in reserve. And then he climbs up back onto the deck of the ship, and Maya, who was his whole card, is loose, and she is fucking shit up, because that's what she do. And you should have known better, Calder. Like, she was holding her own against Urziah. Did you really think that you were going to be able to like keep her captive? Come on. And like, no, he didn't really think that. He knew as he was doing it, this was a bad plan. That said, I am not convinced this isn't going to work out in his favor in the end anyway. But it's certainly not going to go the way he intended it to go. So, yeah, that's the end of the book, guys. I'm dying. I'm so... And I think George sent me an email saying that he does intend to commission the next books, so that will be happening. But that won't be for a while, guys. Just, FYI. So I'll probably, before I get to the like second set of books, I'll probably have time to like go back and reread these maybe a couple times if I wanted to beforehand. And reminder that I'm going to be starting Reaper, the next Cradle book, in January at some point. So probably the next book in this series will be scheduled sometime after Reaper. But yeah, so that's what's going on. I really enjoyed this one. I was trying to think whether I enjoyed it more or less than Shara's POV. I think in some ways I like it better just because Calder is more relatable to me personally. Shara is just so cut off and cold and such a killer that, as interesting as she is, it's hard for me to really like empathize at points. That's not to say I don't enjoy it, but I think in some ways this crew feels more like people I might know. And everybody in Shara's crew, they're exceptional in certain ways. And that makes them feel really like out of reach, So anyway, I better wrap. But thank you guys so much for listening. And I'm sorry there's a bunch of chat, Evil One in the chat, but I was so focused on what I was doing, I didn't even like go to the chat. But I appreciate y'all showing up, and thank you, George, for commissioning this. It was really fun to read something else by Will White. And yeah, I hope that you guys stay tuned and check the various social media feeds to see when the next books will be coming up. Also, you can just come to the website, unspoiledpodcast.com, and there's like a section on the left bar that says live events. And if you click that, it'll bring you to like the main Crowdcast feed, and things will be listed in order of when they will be aired. So you can go there and see if the next series is listed on there or not. And it may be a while down the list, but it'll be there once it's commissioned. So, all right, guys, I'm going to wrap. Thank you again so much. And I will be seeing you eventually with new chapters. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.